So back to Australia, here's Tanja from Canberra.
Thank you, Paul. Thanks, everyone. I'll start with a bit of a show of hands. Who's new here, as in 1 or 2 years in Croatia? Hands up. All right. 3 to 5? More than 5? Brilliant. That's great. So I'm 5 years, almost 6, and for me it was a multi-stage process, which is very common to a lot of people's moves. So with the encouragement that we've heard, you know, sometimes you can test it out. It doesn't have to be the forever one-way ticket. I'll start with a personal story, but inspired by Paul. With 5 years, I'm giving my 5 things that have really kept it, you know, that have been my survival kit for being in Croatia. So I will aspire to reach 20 and impart that on to others. So thank you, Paul, as always, for the inspiration and for having us here tonight. So the first time I saw my grandmother, I rushed to the window to hide my tears, and I saw the orange roofs of Zadar, the sea and the islands, because we were in her hospital room and she was dying. So I think when you're 11 and it's the first time you're meeting the mother of one of your parents, you know that this is what your life is. Australia wasn't close. US, Canada, Germany, it was easier to get to here. So being in Australia or New Zealand, I think there's even a greater gap and sense, a quest rather, for your identity. So I certainly know for me, coming here to vacation was really not only to enjoy the summer, but also to learn a lot about myself. And I found a great piece in the author Bernadette Jiwa. She has a book on storytelling. There was a study on children who knew the stories of their extended family had a greater emotional well-being. And it wasn't so much about just giving them answers, it was how they went about getting those answers. So when you're hearing those stories directly from uncles, aunts and grandparents, that certainly contributes to your upbringing. And we certainly didn't have that in Australia, but we had a wider community, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. The other grandmother, the first time I saw her on that same trip in '92, was pointed out to me in a field surrounded by a flock of sheep. So I got to spend an amazing 2 months in summer, from dusk till dawn, out on a bicycle that you had to pedal to get the dynamo torchlight on, a total freedom, even shooting guns, I will say. It was, and still is, a bit of a Wild West feeling here for me. And I certainly experienced that having come here to open a business, which I'd never done before, and for whatever reason, naivety and a bit of guts, coming to do it in a country where I certainly didn't speak or read or write the language as I do English, but also with a system that I certainly wasn't familiar with, and I'm certainly to this day, and I'm sure will be frustrated with. So here are my 5. The first one, which these are things I wish I had known before coming here: never assume. Never assume that when, for example, the tradesperson comes in to lay your floor, that it's going to be even. Never assume that the electrician coming in will put the light switch or plug in a convenient place or in properly or something. Never assume. I was at a friend's house this week, and over the stove, the range hood pulled out worked perfectly, but I saw things flapping above it. So never assume that it's installed fully with even the ventilation going out. Never assume that the Mexican or Asian or exotic food will actually taste like you think it should. And never assume that a city that takes 3 weeks to find a key will find it again when you come to get it. That's a bit of an inside joke, but yes, things take a long time here and you think they'd learn the first time. So that's my first one. The second one is, if at first you don't succeed, move on, quick, smart. And I don't necessarily mean with a business. These take time and, don't abandon those dreams. But it certainly relates to partnerships or getting support where you think you should get it. So if you feel that you're hitting your head against a brick wall in a place, there are plenty of people, organisations and places in this country who are proactive, progressive, and will share the same vision as you. And I've certainly found that and wished I'd found it earlier. So I don't waste any more time now on anyone who just doesn't get it. The third one is on the topic of time, and that is guard your time. I certainly didn't set boundaries when I came here. I fell into the 4-hour coffee trap. It was easy, but also I didn't really assess that the people sitting around me, you know, didn't have a mortgage, didn't really have to strive for something. And so it was very easy to get caught up in that. And also, I always said yes to someone's friend who was coming to Split, for example, would I show them around? To later find out it wasn't even a close friend, it was their neighbour's, dog sitter's, uncle's godfather or something. And so just because you're living here or you move here, closing the door or being a lot more selective is something that I wish. And the last one on that topic on guarding your time is when it comes to remote work, which is what I do. I started with a co-working business here for 5 years, which I just closed this year. And now work in consulting, so whether it's events and projects and things. But if you are remote working, particularly if it's a different time zone, asynchronous. I was up from 11 p.m. to 2 a.m. when I first moved and did my first trial move, and that's really hard. Like, you can't really function and live your life here, so guarding your time. The fourth one is, we hear a lot of stories about locals who maybe take too much of a pomalo or maybe don't align with us, but look for inspiration from locals. And I've been really lucky to have some gun mentors, so people who've been here for a long time and, extracting what, their experiences has been invaluable. And, looking at things in different ways, I'd never considered or really appreciated how many multiple sources of income that locals have. Renting apartments, selling olive oil, you name it. There's so many ways that you could actually build up different income streams, and that was brilliant. You kind of had the easy path in Canberra. And so a great example as well is thinking differently about approaching something. I know it's quite hard to get a loan here if you don't have a credit history. And so I thought this was brilliant. There's a couple in Pakistan who, he's a foreigner, she's from here. They have found those really daggy apartments and rented them out long term, so over 10 apartments now, I think, modified them in a way that will appeal to a foreign audience. And, it guarantees rent for the owner. You don't have to go outright and buy an apartment. So really innovative ways that people who can't necessarily raise the capital, because I know people are averse to getting loans or aren't able to. So there's really a lot of hacks that I've seen here from locals that are quite inspirational, at least for me. So that creative thinking toward entrepreneurship has really been great. And the fifth one is related to what I think a lot of people have mentioned, encouraging others to come here, particularly if you have a great business idea, something that works abroad, may or may not work here, of course. I know when I researched co-working spaces, I was applying that research to Canberra and how it worked in Canberra. Had I applied it to Zagreb, probably very different to Split, which is very seasonal. When you have the most people in that city, you have the least amount of people coming into that type of business because they can't stay for a month or more. And so having an approach where you don't quit your day job, maybe reduce it to 3 or 4 days and test out your thing, get a feel for the land. And I would also add to that, think smarter. And I don't mean in a patronising way. Add in digitalisation. So the EU, for example, is focusing on digitalisation and green. So, smart properties, wireless check-in, etc. Those things will set you apart, not necessarily if it's property or apartments, but adding in ways that are better will get you ahead. So that's only 5. There's plenty more in this book, giving it a great plug here. So that's me. Please feel free to connect online or here in person, and thank you, Paul.
Thanks very much, Tanja. Does anybody else who's not named as a speaker want to come up and take the microphone and say a few words about their story? Anybody? Anita, maybe? Would you like to say something?